Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel with your top headlines from across the region. It's 7 a.m. in New York City and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Khalid Ben David, and these are the latest developments coming to you from Israel. And some dramatic news. At this hour, Hamas is scheduled to finally begin returning the body of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who fell in battle in Gaza in 2014. Now, this is after Hamas claimed over the weekend that they had uncovered Goldin's remains, releasing video footage of the recovery of several bodies from a tunnel underneath Rafah, which the terror group says was located in IDF-held territory. Last night, IDF Chief of Staff Ayalon visited the Goldin family at their home to update them on the latest developments. The Goldin family, which has campaigned tirelessly for Hadar's return over the past 11 years, released a statement saying the entire country is awaiting for Hadar to be returned to us, and they urged everyone to remain calm until that can be confirmed. Well, on Sunday morning, after Israeli officials criticized the delay in returning Goldin's remains, Hamas announced they would turn over the body to the Red Cross at about 2 p.m. local time now. Goldin was 23 years old when his body was seized by Hamas after he was killed in fighting between the terror group and IDF troops during Operation Protective Edge in 2014, as was that of his fellow soldier Oren Shaul. Now, Shaul's body was recovered from Gaza by the IDF last January. But Goldin's return has become tied to the fate of some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels below Rafah in IDF-held territory. The U.S. is reportedly pressuring Israel to allow the terrorists safe passage back to the Hamas-held area of Gaza. Now, Zamir is said to have recommended that this only should happen if Goldin's body is first returned to Israel. But some Israeli ministers have opposed letting the Hamas terrorists walk free under any conditions. And the militant wing of Hamas has said that the terrorists in the tunnels would, quote, not surrender themselves to the enemy under any conditions, and that the mediators would have to find another solution for the ceasefire to continue. And staying on the hostage issue, yesterday Israel confirmed that the body that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad returned from Gaza on Friday night was indeed that of 61-year-old Lior Rudayev. Now, Rudayev served as the deputy security coordinator at Kibbutz Nir Yitzhak. He was a longtime member of its civil defense squad. On the morning of October 7th, he was preparing for a motorcycle ride when he received an emergency call to help defend the kibbutz. He fought alongside other local security members and was killed while battling terrorists trying to breach the community's fence. His body taken into Gaza. Yesterday, the IDF did hold a brief ceremony at the Gaza border, draping the casket holding Rudayev's remains in an Israeli flag before escorting it to the Abu Kabir Institute in Tel Aviv, where experts confirmed the identity of the remains. Rudayev was posthumously promoted to warrant officer in the IDF reserves, and he's remembered as a man devoted to family, community, and service. Israel on Friday also laid to rest Captain Omer Nutra. He's the Israeli-American soldier who fell defending the border on October 7th. His funeral in Tel Aviv drew hundreds, including President Isaac Herzog and top Israeli and U.S. officials. The additional fallen hostages still held in Gaza include Master Sergeant Ron Givley. He's a police officer killed while defending Kibbutz Alumim. Menny Godard, who was murdered alongside his wife in Kibbutz Be'eri. Dror Or of Kibbutz Be'eri, who was killed in captivity in Gaza, but whose two children were freed in the first hostage deal, and Sud Thisik Rinthalak, a Thai worker who was killed in Kibbutz Be'eri. Meanwhile, the supply of humanitarian aid for Gaza's population during and after the war with Hamas has been a challenging and problematic task for Israel, but it now appears the authority for carrying out that mission is being transferred to the U.S. and the post-war infrastructure it is establishing in Gaza. The Washington Post reported this weekend that primary decision-making for distribution of Gaza aid has now been assumed by the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center in Kiryat Gat, with Israel taking a secondary role. An Israeli official confirmed to Reuters that this process is underway, but added that Israel remains involved in the supervision and monitoring of Gaza aid. Israel has long complained that aid distribution in Gaza by the UN and other international groups has been compromised by cooperation with Hamas, which has seized supplies for its own purposes. Now, during the war, Israel tried to address the problem by first having the aid distributed by Kogat, the IDF branch that deals with the Palestinian civilian population, and later by setting up the joint US-Israel-Gaza humanitarian fund, which was phased out as the war ended. Now the US is taking on a more direct role in aid distribution, which may prove a daunting mission to provide sufficient food, medicine, and shelter for nearly 2 million Gazans as winter approaches. And President Trump today will host the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the White House. It's the first official visit by a Syrian leader to the U.S. in nearly 7 decades. The two are expected to discuss regional issues, including security arrangements between Israel and Syria now being negotiated directly between Jerusalem and Damascus. Al-Shara's visit comes just days after sanctions still in place against Syria were lifted. That's including the U.S. officially revoking Shara's status as a designated global terrorist. At the White House, Shara, a former member of al-Qaeda, is expected to sign off on Syria joining the U.S.-led global coalition to defeat Islamic State. And in a short video posted this weekend by Syria's foreign minister, Shara was seen playing basketball in Washington with the top generals of U.S. Central Command, including the CENTCOM commander, General Brad Cooper. Well, he has come a long way from al-Qaeda in a very short time. Well, joining us now for more is Ambassador Danny Ayalon. He's the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., former deputy foreign minister, now chairman of the Silver Road Capital Group. Ambassador Ayalon, thank you for joining us. First of all, I want to just get your reaction to what seems to be the return of Hadar Goldin. I believe you were even a member of the government when he was taken, and it's been an agonizing 11 years for his family and for Israel.
Yes, he's the longest hostage in Gaza. And indeed, it was very, very anguishing for his family, for the entire country. So I think this is a wonderful news. And not only it puts a closure to an open wound, not just for the family, but for the entire nation, it is also, I would say, re-strengthening the Israeli, I would say, ethos of never leaving anyone behind and doing everything, no matter how long it takes, whether it's 11 days or 11 years. For us, it's the most important thing is to bring a closure. And I hope that this indeed will be the case. With Hamas, you never know until the last minute. They're playing with it. They're trying to actually regain control of the process, and maybe in between to get some legitimacy among all the negotiators and the other players in Gaza.
Right, and in fact, another aim reportedly, and I want to stress none of this has been officially confirmed, but reportedly another aim by Hamas is to get Israel to allow the free passage of the some 200 terrorists being held, not being held, but are still hiding in tunnels beneath Rafah in Israeli-held territory. I mean, it had been reported that Chief of Staff Samir had said that couldn't be allowed until the remains of Hadar Goldin were returned. There are other ministers in the Israeli cabinet who said under no conditions should these terrorists be allowed to walk free. U.S. reportedly pressuring Israel to make some kind of deal. What's your response to that? How should Israel be handling this?
Well, first of all, it's a very interesting development because it seems like the table has been turned over Hamas. And now we have their terrorists as hostages. Whether they should be released or not, I think only if we get all the hostages, there are 4 more left, if indeed Lieutenant Goldin's body is returned. But I don't think that we should be in any hurry to do that. I think it's also quite disconcerting, if not a real concern, that the U.S. is putting a pressure on Israel to release these 200 terrorists, because this may bode very ill on the process at all. Because if the U.S. is going to listen to, and I'm sure that they listen to Erdogan and to Qatar, who vouch actually for Hamas, this is not a very good development. because if we want to see the 20-point agreement or plan of Trump being implemented, it has to be adhered to the last condition, that is in spirit and in letter. And if this is not the case, I think Israel should not move forward.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you were bringing up a big issue that relates to another item that we just covered now, which is this report, we should say originally in the Washington Post, but it's been confirmed, at least partially confirmed by Israeli officials, that the U.S. has now sort of taken the lead in decision-making about the distribution of aid in Gaza, saying that it's really the U.S. officials that are based in this command center in Kiryat Gat that are making it charge. And of course, that is a concern for Israel because, again, even just in the last week, we've seen footage showing that showing Hamas operatives, terrorists, basically ransacking one of these aid convoys going into Gaza. So how concerning should this be, certainly for Jerusalem, this kind of development moving forward, while these issues, for example, are still really kind of unresolved?
Yes, and there are actually two issues here. First of all, and in principle, is relinquishing control. Was it a joint decision between Washington and Jerusalem? Was it a unilateral by Washington just imposing it on Israel, which is not a good thing? So this has to be pretty much spelled out. On the other hand, the fact that tactically someone else is being responsible is not such a bad idea. I don't think Israel should be in between the food and the Gazan people, but only under condition that Israel will have an inspection rights to make sure that no munitions, and we know Hamas is doing their best to rearm, to bring in more explosives. We know that they're using drones coming out of the Sinai, coming out of the parts in Rafah that are controlled by Egypt. So I would say that it will take a lot of close coordination between Israel and the United States on the ground. But again, we have to look at the bigger picture, and that is Israel losing control of the situation and letting the United States taking over completely?
Well, you're a former diplomat for Israel and deputy foreign minister, ambassador to the U.S. I mean, on one hand, it's fine to say that, and the other is then how, even if that would be the case, how should Israel handle that, given, of course, what it owes the U.S., what it owes President Trump in so many other areas, including, for example, in relation to Iran and other pressing matters?
Well, today Israel really does not have any leverage or any maneuverability. On the one hand, as you mentioned, rightly so, we are totally dependent, and we owe a big debt of gratitude to Trump, I would say, single-handedly. And unlike with previous administrations, we always had a leverage either through the American public or through the other arms of government, like the Congress. Here is not the case. Unfortunately, we're losing ground on both the Congress and the American public. We saw what happened in New York last week with the election of a sworn anti-Semite to be the mayor. So in very much, we are now must adhere to what Trump is saying. And there is another, I would say, bad development, which is we always used to be the only ones having the ear of the president. Now it's also Erdogan, it's also Qatar, and they may also influence the president. And I suspect that the pressure to release the 200 terrorists in the tunnels is part of the request from Qatar and Turkey.
Right. And everything you just said, Ambassador, really also relates to this meeting today set for today in the White House between Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara and President Trump. It's first of all just a remarkable turnaround by someone who was an Al-Qaeda fighter, now is playing basketball with the head of CENTCOM in Washington, if you've seen that footage. But more seriously concerning for Israel is that Israel is trying to navigate new security arrangements with Syria. It's taking a more cautious approach to Ahmed al-Shara and his regime. And yet it does seem as if President Trump is moving very quickly ahead to normalizing relations between Washington and Damascus, something which may be well formalized today.
Yes, Caleb, and that could be a very good development if indeed the Americans will be seized with the situation and taking care of their best friend and ally here, which is Israel. And Israel's concern in Syria, first and foremost, is to have a buffer and not to allow any rogue militias, whether they are Sunni militias like the ISIS or whether they are Iranian militias that have taken a basis in Syria, certainly under the former regime of Assad. So this is the first thing. Secondly, we have a very strong interest to keep the well-being of the Druze community in Sueda in Syria, which also have been butchered and murdered by Syrian military, which is under the Julani or Shara control. I think what would be important for us is to have a humanitarian corridor between Hadar, between Israel's Golan Heights and Sueda. I think this is very, very important. Syria has become a battleground of many countries in the region. Turkey, Israel, Iraq, Iran still, and of course the powers, the United States and Russia. I hope at the end of the day, in order to stabilize the situation and really to give Syria back to the Syrians, we will have to see a reformed regime in Syria, and I'm not sure that we can still trust al-Julani, al-Shara, because with all the good intentions and the gestures of the Western, and especially Trump, by lifting all the sanctions, we have not seen anything on the ground by al-Shara actually to merit and to justify the lifting of these sanctions. So we are just in the beginning of the road, and here again it will take a lot of coordination with the United States to make sure Syria doesn't fall to the prey of extreme Sunnis. After it has been released from the extreme Shia of Iran with the departure of Assad, we certainly do not want to see them go the other way, which would be for us and just for the entire region just as dangerous.
Right. Then that other direction, I mean, you alluded also, it concludes the influence of Turkey. Israel has expressed concern that even Turkish military could be given a position there in Syria. I want to ask you about that because unfortunately, even though Turkey now is assuming a role, for example, apparently in some way in sort of the post-war Gaza, we see something like last week a prosecutor in Turkey issuing arrest warrants for over 30 Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Now, for those who know their Israeli diplomatic history, have had some issues even dealing with Turkey directly. I want to get your response to that, especially as we do see President Erdogan kind of on the rise in the region, including in areas, be it Gaza and be it Syria, that are of paramount importance to Israel.
I think this is a strategic mistake by Syria on a few accounts. First of all, nobody really pays attention to the legal system of Turkey. We know that Turkey under Erdogan is basically a dictatorship. We know that their legal system is one that put in jail journalists and any other who are, let's say, resisting Erdogan. So this is not really a major concern. Anyway, no Israelis, certainly Netanyahu and other ministers are not having any plans to go and visit in Turkey. So in that case, it really is meaningless. However, why it is a mistake? Because Israel now has a better position and few more cards to press on the United States not to allow Turks in Gaza. We know that Erdogan is very much like to have the Turks participating either in the stabilization force or in any other civil capacity. We do not want to have Turkey in Gaza, and actually this plays into our hands to show that Erdogan and Turkey right now under him is not a friendly country to Israel, so there is no reason whatsoever for Israel to allow Turks in like we wouldn't allow Iranians right now in.
All right. Well, hopefully there are those in Washington that are listening to that, and we'll just have to see how, for example, this meeting with President al-Shara in the White House goes today. Ambassador Danny Ayalon, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
My pleasure.
In other news, the Israeli ambassador to Mexico, Einat Kranz-Niger, has said she will not be intimidated after Mexican authorities reportedly foiled an alleged Iranian plot to assassinate her, describing the revelation as deeply upsetting, but insisting she'll continue to work as usual. Now, in a report by the Axios news service, U.S. and Israeli officials revealed the plot was foiled last summer, an attack that was apparently planned as a response to Israel's military operation in June, taking out the regime's nuclear facilities. The exposure of this plot falls almost 1 year to the murder of the UAE Chabad representative Rabbi Tzvi Kogan by agents of the IRGC in Dubai. Now, the assassination plan against Kranz-Niger is part of a broader campaign that the Tehran regime has waged over the years against Israeli and Jewish targets, but also Iranian dissidents abroad who have been targeted as enemies of the regime. Israeli and international security officials have been warning that this campaign was only likely to intensify following Iran's defeat by Israel and the U.S. in the June war, and also by growing unrest within Iran itself. Now, last August, Australia expelled the Iranian ambassador there after discovering that IRGC agents were behind a string of anti-Semitic attacks taking place in that country. Now, after the Mexico plot has been revealed, Ambassador Kranz-Niger said she will continue to represent Israel there without fear. This won't stop me, she said. We have a job to do, and we'll keep doing it. Well, joining us for more is Mitra Jashni. She is a political and cultural expert advisor for the Iranian Americans for Liberty organization. And Mitra, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, I want to ask you, certainly Iranian, Israeli security officials always on their guard, Iranian dissidents and those who are working in opposition to the regime, such as yourself, have always had to be on guard. The Iranian campaign has gone on for decades. But is there some heightened concern that after that humiliating defeat the regime suffered in June, that you're going to, even greater caution is going to be needed, that Iran is even going to step up this campaign abroad?
First, thank you very much for having me in your program. Actually, everybody knows the Islamic Republic is by its nature and practice a regime that uses terror and assassination as instruments of state policy. This is not a novel claim, but one substantiated over decades, from the AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires to other transnational attacks and proxy operations. Its willingness to target not only foreign adversaries, but also Iranian dissidents abroad means that anyone who challenges or criticizes the regime is at real risk. We have repeatedly seen that Tehran does not confine its coercive reach to its borders. It will pressure perceived opponents whatever it can, given that record opponents of the regime, whether activists, journalists, the community leaders, or dissidents living abroad, must treat the threat as serious and persistent.
Right, and Mitra, we did see Australia, for example, expel the Iranian ambassador, but considering what Iran was doing in that country, one might consider that a somewhat mild response. Are foreign governments, especially, for example, in Europe, where we've seen a lot of these plots take place, are they, first of all, taking all the precautions necessary to protect, for example, Iranian dissidents who are living there? And are they taking sufficient measures in retaliation against the Tehran regime when these kind of plots are exposed or these events actually take place?
No, frankly, they are not. Too many European states still underestimate the sophistication and the local networks Iran uses. Recent investigations and government statements have exposed worrying examples, including cases where Iranian-funded institutions have allegedly been used for intelligence and hostile activities in Europe, showing how proposed defenses can be when authorities are complacent. In some countries, funding streams from Tehran and from allied foundations have continued largely unchecked, while community-level centers that should be safe havens for refugees and dissidents have at times become vectors of influence and even covert operations. If European governments do not adopt a far more rigorous, coordinated approach, cutting problematic funding channels, monitoring suspected organizational activity, and offering meaningful protection to at-risk Iranians, the danger will grow and ultimately become far harder to contain.
Right. And Mitra, the security analysts, as I said, have said some of this is perhaps these plots are in retaliation for actions taken against it either by Israel or the international community sanctions. And some say it's also a reaction to periods of growing unrest within Iran. I want to get your reaction because we are hearing things about the unrest in Iran now over the water crisis and other issues.
Actually, the protests are extremely serious between Iranian people, between diasporas, and also the opposition of this regime. People are under crushing economic pressure, and the recent 12-day war showed Iranians once again that the regime doesn't care about its citizens' safety. The anger is broad. It's not only political activists, but teachers, workers, retirees, and even doctors. We see a lot of doctors that they are in jail now who are joining in this protest. Iranians are united in their desire to end this regime, but they need more support from the opposition abroad, from allies inside the country, and of course from Western governments. The West can help by cutting the regime's financial lifelines and blocking its terror networks. The Islamic Republic is already hollowed out from within with coordinated domestic and international pressure. Its collapse is only a matter of time.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Mitra Jashni from the Iranian Americans for Liberty organization, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for more updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. You could also catch us on our ILTV app. Of course, just scan that QR code that's popped up on your screen to stay connected. I'm Khaled Ben David, and thank you for watching us on ILTV.